You're listening to SM Media, the number one place for exclusive content.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this special edition of the Scottish Football Show right here in SM Media. I'm Scott McPike, like to be your host. Wilson and Shankers are joining me. Wilson, you've not got long before you're meeting with your superior, Mr. Lowell, you're telling me.
So, yes, he's called me. I mean, some heads need crack today, so we'll make some tough decisions today, hopefully.
Shankers, you good?
Turn the season around.
Aye, good to be here again as always.
Brilliant. We're joined by a very special guest. We're joined by Hamish Carton from 67 Hail. Thanks very much for joining us, Hamish. A pleasure to welcome you on.
No worries, Scott. Thanks for having us on, guys.
No worries. We'll start off with the news that was coming through yesterday. Obviously, Christopher Jullien has tested positive for COVID-19. 13 players and 3 staff were told to self-isolate, and that included the manager Neil Lennon, assistant manager John Kennedy. Hamish, where do you start with this?
Where do you start with this?
Yesterday, and you covered it well, but just tell us what's happening.
It's just so self-inflicted. And the club's statement yesterday is probably a good place to start, because I just thought that was an absolute disgrace. If you're talking about, an organisation that's taking absolutely no responsibility for anything, which Celtic have done all season, then, Celtic are the club that you're looking at. I just thought the statement yesterday, I think contrition was the word that was used on television last night. No awareness of what the support are feeling. Try to group the support in with the club, saying that we're all hurting, when in reality, it's the club that have caused this hurt towards the support. Going to Dubai was an absolute joke. I covered it last week, even prior to the positive COVID case and the 13 players missing. So this isn't me saying, after the event that it was a joke. At the time, it was a joke, and everyone else thought that as well. There was no need to go to Dubai. I don't think any other major team in Europe has had a winter break this year. But for some reason, Celtic felt they were due, they were entitled to a trip to Dubai. It's backfired massively. We dropped points last night as a result of that. I think we would have beaten Hibs if we'd had those 13 players available. Maybe that's presumptuous, but I do think we would have won the game. And now the league's totally over. And as I say, it's totally self-inflicted, which is probably the biggest frustration from the club. We had the positive COVID cases before the first derby of the season, and that was frustrating, but that wasn't the club's fault. We just had to take that one. Whereas this right now is just totally self-inflicted.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Wilson as well, I'm going to bring you in this as well. What do you kind of make of the whole thing? Obviously, when we were recording the show on Sunday, we'd heard Christopher Jullien was a positive case. We assumed that it was going to be Christopher Jullien would be self-isolating, but surely the whole team would have to obviously do something as well. So what's your thoughts, obviously, for Sunday? What you kind of thinking about the whole thing?
Again, I've got mixed feelings, to be honest. And again, I'm looking at the perspective, in hindsight, they'll say, yes, the trip was wrong, etc. I can understand, why it was booked, and I'm sure Celtic are following the correct guidelines as all these other clubs and whatnot. What does kind of concern me as such, or puzzles me slightly, is if Celtic had won the Old Firm game, would there be such this big outcry of they went to Dubai and they shouldn't have went to Dubai? I actually think it's a bit of a sideshow. Now obviously I hope Chris Joe, none of the players, are severely affected by the virus and whatnot. But if Celtic had won the Old Firm game, would there be this absolute circus of what's going on just now? And that's what I don't get. And as I said, and I've commented to you guys yesterday, I know a lot of folk in social media are on Celtic's case. But again, if it was their club, would they be quite as passionate to say they shouldn't have went, etc.? Now, again, it's probably not an essential work travel, but this was put in place. The SFA allowed it. The Scottish Government allowed it. Okay, so in effect, you could argue, not that I'm going to, but you could argue, why shouldn't they have went? And as I say, I think this is a big deflection tactic, and the pressure to take away the performances on and off the field, I suppose, and what was a ridiculous performance last night, in my opinion. Again, and I just wonder if the whole kind of COVID thing has taken over the discrepancies within the board, the management seats, and the dressing room.
Yeah.
So I'm not 100% against this trip to Dubai. I just think it's been used as a deflection from performances from the board and the players.
Shankers, where do we see it going for here? Obviously, we'll bring Hamish in this as well. Like, where do you go for here if you're Celtic?
I think you've obviously got the game on Saturday, and you're still going to have the players who are isolating, missing for that game. I didn't think Celtic were too bad. I thought, if anything, it should have gave Hibs a lift last night, and they probably feel that they should have taken some for a severely weakened Celtic team. But I agree with Hamish. I think Celtic would have, after the performance at Ibrox, they having all the players back, they would have seen Hibs off comfortably. So when Hamish is saying it's totally self-inflicted, I couldn't agree more. What a point I seen was if they stayed and just trained in Scotland and Jullien picked up the COVID case, he would have been the only player that would have to isolate. Therefore, the other 13 players and coaching staff wouldn't have had to isolate, and they would have been available. So if they talking about Dubai, should they have went, shouldn't they have went, it doesn't really matter now, because at the end of the day, it's almost cost them the match last night. Well, definitely cost them the match last night. Saturday's going to be a difficult game for them. I really don't know where they go, and Celtic fans are calling for changes for the top to start with. I don't think it's Neil Lennon or the players' fault. They've not went to the board and said we want to go to Dubai. Peter Lowell are the hierarchy of the club have decided that trip's going ahead. So I don't think, apart from the social distancing and all the restrictions and whatnot over there, I don't think the blame can be handed at the players and staff. I think it comes for the men above.
See, I slightly disagree with that, to be honest, because now, and I'm said this on the chat, our WhatsApp chat. Why would Peter Lawwell, if there wasn't financial investment coming from Dubai or the Far East or something, why would he make that decision and say, right, let's get the players away? That's nothing to do. The players have nothing to do with him. Neil Lennon must have made the decision, I want a warm weather training camp in the winter. That must come from the manager. Boardroom guys in suits don't decide, let's take the players to Dubai for a jolly. That's up to Neil Lennon. And again, I understand the players have to follow suit and do as they're told. But Tom Rogic didn't go. So did he decide, for a wee bit, that's a wee bit much? I think I disagree with that trip. So he stayed at home but played last night. So I think Neil Lennon has, I may be wrong, but I think Neil Lennon's made that decision to go to the camp, and it's too late to call it off, to get away either from the heat of an old firm defeat, or if they'd won, to go away and relax and enjoy the moment. I don't think the decisions get any, unless there's a financial thing going on that we don't know about. That decision's from Neil Lennon, the manager. I
think they've been for the last 5 years or something like that. So is it not just like an annual thing for the club, rather than, it's not as if they've not been the last few years and then they've just went, all right, I think this will be a good idea to break things up a lot. I think it's a club decision that's just part and parcel, because there is normally a winter break at this time of the year.
Absolutely, but again, where have they been the last 5 years? Apart from maybe last year, I suppose. Last year was only too far away. I mean, if Kelly were top of the league by 20 points at Christmas, I would take them to Dubai, As I say, but if Kelly are 2 points for the relegation zone, think they can get away with a jolly to Dubai for a week? Absolutely not.
Hamish, what's your kind of response to that? What the boys have just said there? Like, are you agreeing with that, or do you think there's more to it?
I don't think there was any need for Celtic to go to Dubai this year. We have been there, I think, every year since Brendan Rodgers came in. So what's that? I think that'd be five years this year. But there was no pandemic last year or the previous 4 years. There was a winter break the last 4 years. There was no winter break this year. That's, I think, folk aren't talking about. There is no winter break in Scotland this year. We actually moved the game against Hibs back a couple of days so we could go. We could have played one of our many games in hand last week and, put some sort of pressure on Rangers ahead of their game at Pittodrie. Another major missed opportunity from the club. With regards to who sanctioned the trip. I think it'd be a bit of everyone, and that's not just me, getting a cop out there. I think it would be a bit of everyone. But there seems to be a feeling, a narrative around Celtic that Dubai saves our season. So if you look at the last, I think, 4 years, we've had negative derby results prior to going to Dubai. We had the last 3 years have all been Rangers wins, and even the year before that was a 0-0 draw at Parkhead when Rangers were big underdogs. So the last 4 years we've gone into the winter break in really bad spirits. And I think every year Dubai's kind of saved us, or that's been the narrative. But if you look at last season, prior to the derby defeat, the 2-1 at Parkhead at Christmas, we actually won 11 league games in a row prior to that. So that wasn't a Celtic team that was, all over the place and, needed saved in Dubai. I think it was just a case of Dubai almost gets a reputation for saving Celtic that it doesn't deserve. And I mean, I know we're missing players against Hibs last night, but did any of you guys see the Dubai effect in operation last night in the 1-0 draw against Hibs? Did the players look fitter after an intensive training camp, as Neil Lennon called it? Not for me.
Well, that's what I want to touch on as well. Obviously, I want to bring on the Shane Duffy thing as well. This was obviously revealed last night. Shane Duffy, we were told, John Kennedy came out during the week and said there's been breaches in the social bubbles and things like that. Shane Duffy can't play because he's breached the social bubble, and he plays last night. What I don't get, how's this not been discussed more? Because it was Sky Sports News reported yesterday Shane Duffy can't play and he's in the team. So surely that's a breach of some kind. Like, what was your kind of thoughts on that, Hamish?
It is a difficult one because we don't know the ins and outs. We don't know why Shane Duffy left the training camp in Dubai. There was rumours, you've probably seen them, of him going on a 2-hour bender or something like that. There was also chat that he'd left for family reasons, which is of course totally different. But I think that folk aren't really talking about Ross Doohan was on the bench for Celtic last night, and he'd been in Ross County's bubble, so he technically hadn't been part of Celtic's bubble at all and came right in. Scott Robertson's been recalled to the club, and I would expect him to be in the squad for Saturday. He's been, I think, at Gillingham this season, so he's not been in the bubble and he'll be fine. So you've got to include, Doohan and Robertson in that if you're also discussing Duffy. But another thing I had pointed out by a guy who used to work at a League One club in Scotland, saying that this whole bubble thing is a complete myth in Scottish football, because the players leave their bubble every night to go home to their family. So those are all things worth considering.
Yeah, I mean, the game last night...
Can I just ask you something quickly, Hamish? What is your thoughts as a Celtic fan on the fact that, I know Jullien could have picked it up in Scotland before he went or whatever, does he need to even go the trip, the fact that he's injured anyway? And see if other than a global pandemic, the last year I can see the point in taking an injured player away for rehab or whatever, but just because of the times that there is and everything that's going on, they're only getting, it's not as if they're going away for 2 weeks or 3 weeks training camp, they're going away for 5 days or whatever. Does he really need to go? I don't think he's at a stage of his injury where he will be doing rehab anyway because he's in crutches. Does he need to go that trip?
And it was an intensive training camp, you've got to remember as well, according to Neil Lennon. So why would a player who's going to miss the rest of the season, I think maybe back in April, May at the moment, why would he go off to Dubai? Why would you, as you say, in normal times, why would you even take him away? But during a global pandemic, and it's just typical that he's the one that's tested positive. Just totally ludicrous. And Ian Maxwell, I think you were kind of quoting a wee bit earlier on, he was quoted yesterday saying that if Jullien had got COVID in Scotland, it would just have been him who would have had to obviously be missing anyway, but the 13 players wouldn't have missed out as a result. That's the SFA chief executive saying that. So right away there he's saying that Celtic going to Dubai cost us the 13 players been out and cost us 2 points last night. So that's it in black and white right there.
Yeah. Wilson, I'm keen to bring you in and Ian Maxwell here because I want to kind of get your thoughts on his statement, because I thought it was puzzling to say the least what he came out and said.
It's laughable. But again, it's a bit of a culture thing, just the blame's going to be laid at our door, so we'll just rebuff it, into someone else. Now, I don't think there's anyone out there, maybe apart from Jason Leach, that understands the science behind this whole COVID-19 coronavirus and how it's traced and tracked. Now, again, for all we know, Chris Jullien could have caught it on the plane from a punter. They didn't have their own plane, to go there. So he could have caught it there. And as I say, everyone then looks, the SFA okayed the trip, the government okayed the trip, and it's just a deflection tactic when the trip goes wrong. If they went to Dubai, everyone come back fit and healthy. They turned Hibs over last night. Again, no one mentions Dubai, and no one mentions that. It's just deflection tactics. And as I say, the SFA and the government then come out and answer their questions and just deflect it back. So no, as Hamish said, no one really knows who's okaying it and who's doing what with regards to it. But Ian Maxwell, and I know he has to come out and say something, but he actually came out and made himself on the SFA look worse than they already do.
Yeah. Hibs, I want to touch on as well. Hibs did raise concerns before the start of the game to say about, obviously, they wanted Celtic players retested and things like that. See, if you're a Hibs player, and let's just say, for example, you're a Hibs, Shankers, if you're a Hibs player and your partner works for the NHS or something like that, are you right to be concerned about the fact of what's happened there? Because that's the first thing I thought of.
I think they are right to be concerned. Obviously, I don't know how long before the game the negative tests come back for the players or whatever. Hibs asked for a final on the day test or something like that, I think, and Celtic refused. I don't think they were asking anything out of the ordinary. I think they were just maybe a peace of mind just before they go into it. The fact that I think Hibs, and this is not just because I support Rangers or whatever against Celtic, but I think the fact that Hibs were made out as if you don't play, you will be punished kind of thing. I don't think that was right. They're just looking after the safety of their players and their staff and whatever. But I don't think they were right. It was basically put as, if you don't play, you'll be punished or docked points or whatever. I don't think that's right. Obviously, it happened to Kilmarnock and St Mirren earlier on the season. I don't think that's right. They've got the right to be worried about the safety of their players after a positive test. If Hibs go and test their players today or tomorrow and results come back and there's positive tests, and if Celtic do the same, it's just egg in the face, isn't it, really?
Yeah, definitely. Hamish, what were your thoughts of the game? It was almost a one-each draw. It was a bit of brilliance for David Turnbull to get the lead for Celtic, but a late mistake saw Kevin Nisbet equalise. What were your kind of thoughts on the game, watching it?
I thought it was about as much as we could expect, to be honest. When you look at the team that finished the game last night, our keeper was Connor Hazard, who I think was on loan at Dundee last season. Stephen Welsh was our centre-back, who was on loan at Morton last season, and I don't think was a standout for them. You had Karamoko Dembele, who's played, I think, 2 or 3 times for the club. You had Armstrong Okoflex coming off the bench to make his debut. You had Cameron Harper starting, making his first start for the club or his debut. You had Ewan Henderson, who couldn't get a game with Ross County on loan last season, coming on to save the game. So that's what you're dealing with. I know there was, what you would call a few senior players, the likes of Callum McGregor, Tom Rogic, Shane Duffy, players like that. But I really, really wasn't surprised to see the game finish in a draw. I felt that's what it was going to be. I felt it was a fair result as well in the balance of play. I think both teams, created chances throughout the game. Just disappointing to lose the goal so late on. I knew it was coming the minute Laxalt gave away that free kick. You just knew it was going to end like that because we've seen it so often this season. But the damage wasn't done last night. The damage was done in that horror 6-week period from mid-October to the start of December when, we lost the 6 out of 11 games or whatever it was. That's when the real damage was done this season. Last night was just the final nail in the coffin for our title hopes.
Yeah, definitely. Wilson, just before you're called away, there's a couple of questions come in from a couple of fans of yours. Graham Dempsey, how many? Yeah, we asked you this at the start of the season, but we're going to ask you again. How many Celtic players would now get in the Rangers 11?
I mean, is Graham basing it on this one season, or is he basing it on the full fitness and ability?
Let's go. Both team playing to their full potential.
Full potential. Well, out of all the strikers that both teams have, Edouard's the best, 100%. There's absolutely no doubts about that. Alan McGregor's the best goalie by light years of all the goalkeepers.
Right back. Who's in it right back?
Well, I don't know if Shankers can play right back because Tavernier's had, one good season in 5. And Frimpong's now moved himself to the second worst player in the SPL. So I think Tavernier would squeeze himself in at right back.
Who's now worst?
Mikey Johnston. Again, now, and I've said this before, I find there's loads of players. I kind of touched on Greg Kelty with it the other day. Now, Greg Kelty's 10 times the player Mikey Johnston is. But I think Mikey Johnston must be one of these players that he doesn't have a position. He has ability, I don't doubt that. But I don't think anyone, not even him, especially not Neil Lennon, knows what position he plays. I felt a couple of years ago he got hung out to dry by Brendan Rodgers a couple of times by starting old firm games when he hadn't even been training with the first team. And those 2 performances, he was honking. And again, he's had his chance last night, honking again. And
I actually felt a wee bit sorry for players like him last night because, see, if the full team's fit, Mikey Johnston's probably lucky if he's even coming on the pitch, and then all of a sudden you've got to start saying the young boys that come on. The Hibs have got a point and it looks terrible in Celtic. It looks as if their title hopes are ended, but the young boys were all chucked in at the deep end for a faulty that's no their own, if you know what I mean.
But what happened last night, and Hamish might disagree, what happened last night is I think it shows you the massive problems that Celtic have because none of those guys are good enough. Now, I've been very critical of Hibs on here. That was pretty much Hibs' first choice team. You could maybe argue Christian Doyle, Stevie Malin, so they've got a decent squad, but I don't see the whole flattery with Hibs and how good Hibs are and how, Hibs. I think they're garbage. I think they're the same as Hamilton and Ross County and the rest. They're the chufters, but absolutely rubbish.
Kelly.
No, Kelly much better. Absolutely much better. So I just don't get it. And as I say, those boys coming in last night. Now, again, if that had been me, now if I was Edouard and someone had says, right, see tomorrow night, Eddie, the back fours, Frimpong, Duffy, Welsh and Laxalt, I'm a can't play. Because that, and I'm saying that standard is ridiculous for a team that's trying to get into the Champions League, trying to compete to win, back-to-back, trophies, etc. And I just, as I say, I'm looking through that squad list. Now, Soros come on to a game. I think Griffiths, Edouard, Forrest, but I'm looking at that bigger picture of 20, 30 players and I'm thinking, and what I've always done, obviously, when you support a kind of non-old firm team, you look, and I always use Andy Halliday as an example. Now, I thought Andy Halliday at Rangers was rubbish. Absolutely rubbish. But I always felt if Andy Halliday went to Hearts or Kilmarnock or St Mirren or whoever, would be one of their best players. I just didn't think he could push himself to that next level. And I'm looking at that Celtic team, and I'm telling you, Stephen O'Donnell is better than Frimpong. Greg Taylor is better than Laxalt. Okay?
See with Greg Taylor, sorry to interrupt, see with Greg Taylor, see like the fact that like Laxalt couldn't push up to left wing and Taylor couldn't play left back. Like, see if he couldn't get a game when the team's that depleted, it's kind of telling me something. I think Laxalt could play left wing, no bother, you know what I mean? And Taylor could play left back.
I don't think Laxalt should play 5s at the Power Leagues. I don't think he should be allowed to play football. He's that bad. And last night you kind of touched on Shane Duffy. Now, I still think there's a player in there somewhere. And I'm thinking last night, he hit a couple of acres, he won headers. I'm going, maybe it was his identical twin brother that's come up and played at centre half. And then you saw the goal last night, you thought, no, that's the real Shane Duffy. He's back there. But sorry, going back to Graham's point, because I know he'll pull me up on Twitter about this. So because of Frimpong, I'm going Tav at right back. Jullien and I are the two best ability-wise on at centre halves. Golson's very unlucky because I think he's had a good season, but he's been hopeless for the last two. Barisic has no competition at left back, and he's very good. A fully fit James Forrest is the best wide player out of them all. Callum McGregor would get in my Man United team, my Scotland team. Fantastic. So he's a stalwart in there for centre mid. Again, I'm not a massive fan of his, but Steve Davis just oozes quality when he plays for me. You know, and in the fashionable five in midfield, he's the one that sits and moves the ball. And he's, as I say, I think you saw him a couple of times on Sunday, you know, putting in last-ditch tackles and that. So, and then the other one, again, we've kind of discussed this on the show. I think based on his career and what he would offer in a shape, Scott Arfield, who gets beyond the striker. And if you're only playing one up front, you're needing your midfielder to do that. So I think he would squeeze in front of Kamara, Ryan Jack, who are more a sitter. I would play Rogic on the bench and he can get the last half hour because he's not fit enough to play full 90. Up front, Eddie, and I'm struggling at wide left. I would have to seek advice in wide left, to be honest.
Ryan Kent.
He's absolutely garbage. He is absolutely... he's another one that's famed for punching folk rather than his ability as a footballer.
See, just before you go, I've got another question for Stephen Nicol. How do you feel the laptop done in his first job in management?
I mean, you look at the results, and again, it's a no-win situation, you know.
It looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world last night.
If he'd won 5-0, you know, he would have come out and probably said exactly the same things. If he'd lost 5-0, he's a no. It's a wee bit, you know. I remember Auchinleck with a couple of big teams, you know, in the Scottish Cup when they've qualified. So if Hearts beat Auchinleck, everyone's expecting Hearts to beat Auchinleck. So it doesn't really change what you would do. Whereas if Auchinleck goes, it's a big shock and all the pressure's on Hearts, but they're expected to win. As I say, but again, I agree with what you said. It looks as if he would rather be anywhere else than in that dugout last night. And that's a shame because, again, and I know he should be out there shouting instructions, I'm looking at someone like Steve McManus who's trying to force a career in management, obviously, you know, and just stands in the dugout. Tommy McIntyre, who's, you know, an esteemed coach of the SFA and Celtic for 30 years. Maybe he knows a wee bit more than Gavin Strachan. Can he not come out and maybe they do that? As I say, you can't have maybe 10 coaches in the touchline shouting and ranting and raving, but as I say, it's just one disaster for another. But again, aside from a disaster, Rangers have been the best team this season, deserve to win the league. The biggest worry, I think, well, apart from Rangers fans, is I genuinely don't know where Celtic go from here. There is no way they're selling 60,000 season tickets next year. Absolutely not. And as I say, I felt it was kind of the writing was in the wall even prior to the summer, when it was still, you know, it went for Brendan Rodgers being a rat, then it was Kieran Tierney was a rat. And I'm thinking, what is the expectation here?
But see for Brendan Rodgers, Hamish, see now, obviously with what's going on behind the scenes, do you look at Brendan Rodgers now and understand why he left?
Yeah, I've always said that at times a healer with legacies and that kind of thing. That's why I'm so aware of, you know, brandishing Neil Lennon with a certain tag, because we never know how we'll look at it in a few years. But in terms of Rodgers, put it this way, if you add Tierney into it as well, you can certainly see why Tierney left. And the people who, you know, are having a go at Kieran Tierney for not being a Celtic fan and not staying for the 10 look a bit daft now, because there's a guy who's worked his way into the Arsenal first team, while if he'd have stayed at Celtic, he'd be in a team that's struggling like mad. So in terms of Rodgers, I'm not still angry at him. I mean, I've let that go a long time ago, but I still think the circumstances he left, you know, 24 hours before a crucial game at Tynecastle, the fact he took, I think, 3 important members of his coaching staff, I think still left a lot to be desired. But yeah, if you look at the way the club's imploded and the clear, you know, the leadership at the top of the club with the likes of Law and Dermot Desmond, I suppose you can kind of see where he's coming from. I don't think Brendan Rodgers will care, to be honest. I mean, he's managing one of the better teams in England now, while Celtic are struggling. He'll probably actually be quite glad about that with ego, I think.
Yeah, but you've touched on that, Hamish, and again it comes down to mismanagement. Now, Brendan Rodgers didn't phone in the morning of the Hearts game and say, right, I'm away, I'm going to Leicester. These deals, as we all know, take 3-4 days minimum. So in those 3-4 days minimum, Peter Law should have went out and went, right, okay. Now, for all we know, he could have asked anybody. We don't know this. And he put Neil Lennon in, which I think, again, when you're winning, it's fine. It doesn't matter who's in charge. If you're winning, you don't care. But as I say, they had to have someone. Now, what he should have said to Lennon was, we'll give you to the 9 in a row, whatever it was, whatever. But see, in August, you'll not be the Celtic manager. We're going for X, Y, and Z. And that's 100% mismanagement from the top again.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think if you ask Lennon himself, and he would never admit this publicly, if you asked him, do you wish you hadn't taken the job on now after that summer, built a new team and all that kind of thing, I think privately Neil Lennon would wish that he'd stepped away after that, treble cup final against Hearts, because his legacy was away up here. Mm-hmm. He was loved by the Celtic support. He'd come in, he'd saved the team in an hour of need. If he'd have walked away at that point, maybe he could have got another decent job down south. I think as it is now, he's tarnished his legacy a lot. And I mean, where's Neil Lennon's next job going to be? Is he going to get another job at any sort of level in the rest of his career?
Yeah, definitely.
I would take him at Kilmarnock, to be honest, if Alex Dyer gets the sack. I think that's where I think, and I always kind of think this way. Neil Lennon up here was a top player. I don't think we can get away from that. I always think top players might be better trying to get lesser ability players to those kind of levels, Whereas if you were to put Neil Lennon, was Neil Lennon, better than Callum McGregor, Stuart Armstrong, Kieran Tierney, these guys? You're probably thinking, you're better than you. So whereas Neil Lennon, I think, can motivate and instruct guys to get to the level that he played at. Whereas I thought he did okay at Hibs. I mean, he obviously had these issues later on, but as I say, I think that's where his career lies. Hibs is Kilmarnock, St Mirren's. I don't think he had balls up at Bolton as well. But as I say, for being the Celtic manager, and as I say, and again, we always talk about this, and I mention it every week just to try and balance my views. What we forget is Rangers have been brilliant. Mm-hmm. This isn't Rangers are winning the league because Celtic are garbage. This is Rangers are winning the league because they've been brilliant this season. They've been brilliant in Europe. They had a wee faux pas at St Mirren, but that comes with any team. But consistently from August, they have been the best team. The best team wins the league, unless it's based on EBTs and cheating. But we'll not get involved and all that carry on because I need to go back to work anyway. Peter's phoning me.
Right, Wilson's gone, so we're now getting to the serious point of the show. Hamish, David Turnbull, I just want to touch on with you. Obviously, last night his goal was unbelievable, but is he the kind of one bright spark you would take away for that season so far?
Yeah, I think him and Sorrow are the two bright sparks. I just think Turnbull's brilliant. If you're talking about guys who Celtic can build a team around for the coming seasons, then Turnbull's got to be the main man. He can do everything. He can get his foot in. He can drive through midfield, be that box-to-box midfielder, and then he can produce bits of quality like last night. His free kick was in the minute it left his boot. The wee dinks he does, those wee chips over the defence. He seems to do one of them every single game. They're just the sign of a really good player. And I just really hope that Celtic now are going to build a team around David Turnbull. But, the negative side of it is, how did it take so long for him to get into this team? And how was it until a dead rubber Europa League game that Neil Lennon finally gave him his opportunity? It just completely beggars belief to me.
Yeah. Like, see, just when we touch on that as well, like there's more things to kind of touch on. Like Shankers, see last night if you're a Celtic fan and you're seeing Peter Lawwell in the crowd, the way I thought he was sitting with the smuggest look in his face I've ever seen. But what do you think of Peter Lawwell after this debacle?
Well, I think you've seen with banners and protests, etc. I think obviously Lennon's taking a hit because he's the manager of the club. Of course, he picks a team. But I think most of the rage and anger should be at him, because at the end of the day, he picks the manager. He I don't know whether it's he assigns the budget and whatnot. And I think at the start of the season, if you asked Neil Lennon and Celtic, were they happy with their business, with the signings of Barkas and players like that, I think they would be happy. But now it turns to the it's getting kind of sour. So it is. it's almost as you can see now. I don't think Lennon's going to leave. I don't think they'll sack him. It's just kind of the season's going to almost kind of dwindle out, and then it'll come to what if after the first Old Firm, if they went and get rid of him and get somebody else in, would it be different? Would you went in that run? You just don't know. I just think the bridge between fans and the board is just completely gone now. If Celtic go and lose the league and lose 10 in a row, I don't think there's any way back for between the fans and the board. You've got to have, obviously Law's making decisions, but you've got to be some party you think, is this what the fans want? Or you can't just base your decisions basically on the fans want, because then it's fan power and all that. But you've got to, there must be like, I don't know if there's a supporters kind of thing where they put points across to the board, etc. But it's as if the communication between the fans and the board is just totally lost. It's as if whatever the fans want, he's going to do the opposite. It's almost as if he's going out his way to piss them off. Basically, that's maybe not the right way to say it, but that's what kind of from outside looking in. That's what it seems. It's as if the fans are wanting Lennon to go, so he's like, well, I'm going to back him, because if the fans want him to go and he goes and sacks him, then it looks as if the fans have got to say, if you know what I mean. So I think all communication between the fans and the board is totally lost, and I don't think that'll come back.
I think you've hit the nail on the head with that. What do you think of that, Hamish?
I just think that it's gone beyond the results of the team. Like the fans have got anger with Neil Lennon, because Neil Lennon's a manager who's presided over, in my opinion, our worst season ever, maybe, when you consider everything that was up for grabs this year, the most historic season in 30, 40 years. Well, sorry, maybe 25 years since stopping the 10, and it's absolutely gone to shit. We're in, not even the middle of January, and the season is virtually over, bar a few Scottish Cup games. Fans are angry at Neil Lennon for that, and they're also angry for Neil Lennon's comments he's made in the press that just constantly have you tearing your hair out. But I think more of the anger nowadays comes for Peter Law and the board, because the way they've behaved this season, the constant backing of Neil Lennon, the disregard for supporters, the putting up fences outside Celtic Park was just, it was just symbolic of what they think of the supporters at the moment. But in 10 weeks, something like that, they're going to be coming with their hand out again, asking for season ticket money. Yeah. That's when the supporters have we've got to be strong as Celtic supporters, and we've got to say, no, we're not giving you money. There needs to be a collective movement from the support saying, we're withholding our season ticket money, we're not giving it to you until we get something for the club, and that something needs to be a clear plan for next season. It needs to be an idea of who the manager's going to be. It needs to be a proper plan, a blueprint for how we get back to doing something in Europe, because Europe has been, apart from 6 games in the Europa League last season in the group stage, Europe has been a catastrophe for us for about 4 years. It's been an absolute joke. We need to get back to performing in Europe, and then everything else domestically should fall into place because of that. But we need to see that for the support, for the board, sorry. But what I think we will get is a statement for the board in the next few days, back in Lennon, announcing the results of their January inquest that they were doing, their January report. They'll back Lennon to the end of the season, I think, and we'll probably get some bullshit about how COVID is the main reason for us not winning the league this year. We'll probably get excuses about how we've been unlucky with COVID and Rangers have been absolutely fine with COVID, and they'll just hope that fans buy it. But the Celtic support can't buy it. We need to have these board members held accountable, because what has happened this season it's been an absolute disgrace. From ball and goalie going to Spain all the way up until the Dubai trip, it's just been disaster after disaster.
Yeah, just on that, it's not as if the season hasn't gone to pot because they lost Old Firm games. If you take Old Firm games out of that, all the rest of the results, like dropping points at home, etc., that's where the points are falling behind. It's no. If they win all the games and you're 6 points behind because you've lost 2 Old Firm games, fair enough. But it's no Old Firm games. It's games other than that, losing to teams that over the years were Celtic take 9 goals or something off Aberdeen at home over the years. That's what they used to taking 5 and 6 goals off teams at home, and teams are going to Parkhead and they're almost no scared to go into Parkhead anymore, and that's where the league for me the league's no based on Old Firm results. It's take Old Firm away from it. It's poor results against teams that they should be walking over.
That's what I want to bring in, kind of recruitment. There's a question here for Stephen Nicola I want to put to you, Hamish. What type of transfer window should Celtic be having this month to get back to winning ways? Recruit. How do you give more money to? I don't know if they will or not, but you can't give Neil Lennon money if he's going in the summer, and you can't trust the recruitment team to get it right after such a poor summer.
That's why you've got to make a decision over Neil Lennon imminently. Yeah. Then you've got to work out: is Neil Lennon going to be our manager taking us into next season? That's the question they've got to ask. Are we going to give Neil Lennon, never mind about January, are we going to give Neil Lennon another summer to rebuild, when the likes of Edouard and Cham, Ayer move on in the summer? Are we going to give him the chance to rebuild for next season? And by the way, if their answer to that is yes, then I give up, and every Celtic fan will give up. But if that's what they want to do and that's their decision, and they make that this month, then they need to plan starting this month. They need to get players in this month so they can bed in between now and the end of the season. Because for a fact that we're going to have Edouard leaving the club at the start of the summer, we're going to have Ayer moving on, and we're going to end up going into the Champions League, which is obviously the non-Champions route we'll go into, and be playing against a Benfica or someone like that, and we'll end up with Nir Beaton at centre-back again, because it happens every single year. So that's what I'm talking about, a general plan. But there's massive turnover at the club to come, because, as I say, Edouard's going to move on 100%. I think Christopher Ayer almost certainly will move on. I think Ryan Christie will probably go. Scott Brown's contract's up at the end of the season.
Oh, I heard John Kennedy saying about giving Scott Brown an extra 12 months deal. What's that all about? I mean, Scott Brown, I know we can touch on Scott Brown. He's a legend for Celtic, but Sorrow's come in, and that one thing I want to touch on about Sorrow, he's allowed McGregor, Turnbull, Christie. I thought the three of them were allowed to run ragged because of the kind of protection Sorrow gave that Brown hasn't been able to give this season. Yeah, Scott Brown's a legend, I totally understand that, but on this season, you can't give Scott Brown a new contract, surely?
No, on this season, 100% you can't. Scott Brown, in my opinion, Scott Brown shouldn't play much for the rest of the season. I don't think we've got to use the last 5 months of this season to build for the future.
Yeah.
What is the point? What is the point in playing Scott Brown? Because Scott Brown isn't the future of Celtic. What's the point in playing Shane Duffy? Because Shane Duffy isn't the future of Celtic. You could argue even this won't happen, but you could argue what's the point in playing Odsonne Edouard? Because Odsonne Edouard isn't the future of Celtic. He's going to be away in the summer. Now I know there's things like if you don't play him, his market value would go down and all that kind of stuff. But we've got to build for the future. We've got to get the likes of Sorrow and Turnbull permanently in that team. We've got to get, in my opinion, Stephen Welsh in that team. I think we've got to get Albion Ajeti in that team, because he is going to be, hopefully, the future of Celtic in terms of a striker. He's our player. He's not on loan, Albion Ajeti. We've got to get him into that team. I know he took a bit of a slagging earlier, but for me, Mikey Johnson's got to get in that team rather than El Yunusi. Because again, El Yunusi, what's the point in having him in that team? Because he's going to be back down at Southampton next year. What's the point in having Neil Lennon as our manager anymore?
What do you do with the goalkeeper? That's the one thing. That's the one thing that's sticking out to me, because you've spent $5 million in Barkas. Yes, he hasn't kind of lived up to the price tag yet, but do you sell him for half the price, because you're not getting that $5 million back if you sell him in the summer? So do you persevere with Barkas? I don't know what they do here.
He's the same as Ajeti for me. We've got to make Barkas our number one. And to be fair to Neil Lennon, I think that's what he did at the end of December. Yeah. And I think Barkas would have played last night if he hadn't have been self-isolating. But you've got to get him in the team and just to find out if he's any good. You've got to give him a proper run. The pressure's off now between now and May. There's no pressure. The league's away. Yeah, the Scottish Cup's still there, but you've got to get Barkas, Ajeti, Turnbull, Sorrow, McGregor in that team. There's a spine of your team right there, and build for the future. Yeah.
Shankers, I just want to ask you a question just quickly. What are your thoughts on the leagues below the Championship being postponed for 3 weeks?
I think it makes sense. when you take it into account, majority, if not all of the teams are part-time, whereas guys are going to their work, go to football, coming home, they're going to, you're going to, for instance, say they work in a building site, there's different guys from all over the country going on there, then they're going to play against, on a Saturday, against a team for, say it's Brecon, then they're playing against the players, then they're going home to their families. I think it makes sense overall. The only complication, I think, there is 2 part-time teams in the Championship, so they guys are still going to their work and coming home and then going to football. I know now it'll be different because they're getting tested every week. I think that's mandatory. They have to be tested every week, so you will be able to find out. But I think it makes sense because it's part-time football. It's just there's too many complications, too much risk, not knowing. The season started to now, I'll be lucky if the players have been tested. So how do they possibly know if they've got COVID-19 or if they're passing it on or whatever? It just for safety, players' safety and family and all that, I think it just makes it a sensible decision.
Mm-hmm. Hamish, what do you think about it?
I don't know if you guys saw the report. It was either the Daily Record or the Sun yesterday saying that the SFA's decision to take away, the leagues under the Championship or postpone them for a bit or suspend them's the word, was in relation to the fact that they had to give some sort of move to Nicola Sturgeon after the Celtic fiasco in Dubai, which is really, really interesting. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it's really interesting that almost Celtic doing this meant that the SFA had to show they were doing something to combat the rising cases, and their decision was to take away the leagues from League One and below, which I thought was, I'm not surprised you guys haven't seen it because none of my pals had seen it either, and I thought that was like a massive story, the fact that Celtic have almost caused this. In terms of the actual thing, it's disappointing for these players, I think. I think a lot of the clubs got a lot of money recently from the government and from that guy James Anderson, I think his name was. Could they not have tested these players? I know the cost of testing is going down a lot. How much would it have cost to test these players? The Championship can still do it. So why couldn't League One and League Two, if they have got this huge amount of money recently? That'd be my question. I just think it's really sad that these players once again are missing out.
Yeah, but obviously as well.
Just sorry to interrupt. See, just on, I obviously say that I think it's the right decision or that, but when you reflect on the players, I think all these clubs had protocols in place. It was not as if they were going, it was a free-for-all. I think everybody took the right protocols, distancing, etc., sanitizer. I think all that was in place. I think it's just the fact that there is no testing probably made their decision for it. But see, just on that article you're saying, it shouldn't be like they clubs shouldn't be punished for somebody else's wrongdoing. If somebody in one of the leagues come out and was doing something wrong and caused a spread of COVID or whatever, fair enough. But surely they can't be punished for somebody else's wrongdoing, if you know what I'm coming for.
Well, that's interesting you touch on that, because obviously Hibs, there was a tweet by somebody, I don't remember who it was, but there was a tweet yesterday saying if Hibs don't play the game tomorrow, kiss goodbye to the playing Scottish football being able to play on. That's true though. That's probably what would have happened if Hibs refused to play that game. Would the government have stepped in? Is that fair?
I don't know, because then you look back and Kilmarnock and St Mirren almost were the same and it never happened. I know this would be like the third time it would happen, so possibly, but I think in the end up Hibs never really had a choice but to play, if you know what I mean. Nobody forced them, but their hand was almost forced, because if they don't play then sanctions will be taken or whatever. Whether it be points docked or whatever it may be, but I don't think Hibs had an option in the end up. To be honest, I think ideally they wouldn't have played, but I think in the end up their hand was forced and they had to play.
As well as that, I just want to touch on a bit of news that's just come through from STV. They said the Scottish FA compliance officer Claire White may investigate Celtic over their training camp in Dubai. What's that all about?
Why should they know? They're back, they're here, players are isolating, players are tested positive. Everybody knows probably they shouldn't have went, but why investigate now? If Celtic were told don't go to Dubai, Celtic wouldn't have went to Dubai. Celtic obviously had it all clear to go, so that's why they went. So that compliance officer, I don't know who it is or whatever, they obviously knew that Celtic had it all clear, so why investigate now? Just because there's a positive test, they knew there could have been a risk of that. It's not as if it's coronavirus isn't over there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They knew there was a risk of that. I don't really get that, investigating into it. Whatever's done is done, and they just have to move on for it now, I think.
Hamish, there's 2 games coming up for Celtic, home to Livingston, then away to Livingston. Livingston are in very, very good form. Do you have worries about playing one of the informed teams in the league?
Who cares, mate? Genuinely, who cares? The season's over.
Do you believe the season's over though? Like, do you not have a slight thinking of Rangers might?
Nah. Rangers have dropped 4 points all season. I think Rangers have conceded 6 goals all season. What is the gap? 21 points now. If we win our 3 games in hand, which obviously one of them is at Livingston next week, another one's at home to Aberdeen, which is no gimme as well. Even if we win those games in hand, we'll be 12 behind. We would need to win every single game for the rest of the season. I think Rangers would need to lose 4, maybe 5 because of the goal difference that they've got over us. So the league is totally over. It's going to be obviously the same team virtually that played last night. An interesting one I saw. I wonder if we've got a loan recall for Jonathan Afolabi.
That's what I wondered.
Because we badly missed a focal point last night. Now, I don't know the terms of that deal, but getting him in and having a focal point and giving him a chance would surely be better than having to play Cameron Harper or Mikey Johnson or someone like that up there. But, if you think Hibs was bad on Monday, Livingston, even at Celtic Park, is going to be brutal. I mean, who's favourites for those 2 games? It's certainly the one at the Tony Macaroni. Celtic aren't favourites for that game.
And what is that? What I kind of want to know is that the Celtic players? Will the Celtic players miss that game? Is it 10 days from yesterday or 10 days from when they returned? That's
a good question.
Because if it's 10 days from when
I think it's for when they returned. I think.
So realistically, they would make that game. If that's the case,
I think it's only the game on Saturday that they missed.
But even still,
somebody's saying they're no training.
Say
you're sitting in. Obviously, they'll be doing their own at home, but it's just no the same. They've got maybe say that the isolation period. What is it? 7 days or something?
I think it's
10 days.
10.
So say 10 days. They'll have 1 or maybe 2 or 3 days max to prepare for that game. That's a tough one. You don't want to be going away to Livingston on national turf, having trained for a week. I know it's probably one of the toughest places to go in the league, just because they've got that kind of. I know they touch on that style of play. I don't think they've got that anymore, but it's just Livingston away and the Astro, just a hard team. It's hard to beat. It's no 2 fixtures that they would have wanted, especially the form that Livingston's in at the moment.
Yeah, Hamish, I want to make a final point before we finish up. Like, Celtic have had 9 years of dominance. They've been top of they've won 12 consecutive trophies. What does it come down to that this season's went the way it has? Is it overconfidence? Is it a lack of discipline? Is maybe the wrong term, but what do you think's the reason this is going on?
I don't think there's one reason. I really don't. I think there's loads of different reasons, and some people think I'm daft for saying some of them. I think the pandemic has 100% had an effect. I think that if you look at Celtic prior to the pandemic and compare them to the Celtic that we saw even when they returned back in August, there was worlds of difference there. It was a Celtic team that was hitting its stride just when the pandemic hit. I don't think the manager used lockdown the best way he could. I'm talking and I don't always like doing this, but I'm talking physically. Neil Lennon didn't look like he'd taken a lot of care during the lockdown. I think he could have better used the time to work on certain things with regards to Celtic. I don't think a few of the players treated themselves the way they should have during the lockdown. I think Lee Griffiths was obviously one of them. I don't think he's the only one. I think when you come back, you look at the recruitment, and I'm guilty of revising this, because at the time I thought it was a great summer transfer window. But I think if you look at the recruitment now, we signed players for a formation that we no longer play. We signed, Laxalt, and we signed a Yeti to play alongside Edward, and we no longer play that formation. So immediately, you're struggling there. I think, and this will sound daft because every team's had to put up with it, but I think the fans not being at Celtic Park have probably affected Celtic more than a lot of teams, just because I think Celtic, the way they play and the support we get such a kick from the fans more than a lot of teams. But as I say, that doesn't explain why Rangers have been so good this season. And then I think when you add in all the various mishaps, I think the ball and goalie thing set the tone for the season. I think no one really talks about the same game at Kilmarnock. Kanamoko Dembele was photographed with his phone out on the bench. I think things like that have really set the tone for the season. But I think that defeat Rangers dished out to us in October at Celtic Park is probably the main one I would look at. The week leading up to that, the fact we're missing all those players, and then the way Rangers came completely bodied us at Celtic Park, I think gave Rangers a massive boost. It told them that they could win the league. They didn't celebrate that like they did before the previous season. They just high-fived and got off that park, and I think our players never recovered for that at all. And then obviously the board haven't helped anything with their statements, the whole ill feeling around the club. So it's weird because people will point to Neil Lennon as being a complete failure in his second time as Celtic manager, and that's how he probably remembered for his second stint. But if you look at last season, that Celtic team was brilliant last season. We going to Lazio, winning. We dropped 10 points all season. I know it was a shortened season, but we dropped 10 points in 30 league games, which is unbelievable form. Mm-hmm. And it's just gone to shit. So it's just really disappointing. It hurts a lot, but we've just got to move to the future. We can't undo it now.
Mm-hmm. See, just on the point about the supporters, I know things could have been totally different if Celtic had a full house. But do you know how on the flip side that if they were playing like this, they're actually a wee bit lucky that there's no supporters in the ground? I think it would have been totally different if there's support there, because if they're chasing a goal in the last 10 minutes and they give you a big lift and everything. But on the flip side, if they're playing like this and they're not getting rid of Neil Lennon, like banners and stuff like that, and just it could have been really vile at Parkhead if they were in this situation where a full house, say dropping points to St Johnstone or getting out the cup to Ross County. And I know the scenes outside the park were bad enough, but if there's a full house in there, it could have been bad as well, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think it's given the club an excuse not to get rid of Neil Lennon this season, because they can just blame COVID. And I'm telling you now, that is what we are going to see in the next few months. It's going to be the club ramping up the COVID ruined our season propaganda. It's the most nailed on certainty ever. They already started it in the statement they put out on Monday. But no, I agree.
The statement.
I know I've actually got a video going up today where I just go through it word by word and just tear it apart. It was the bit that angered me most about it was I've not got the exact quote, but it was effectively saying we are frustrated. We share the frustrations of our support about this news, and it's like they're trying to get into bed with the support and group us all together, and it's them. They're the ones that have caused the support this hurt. Just no accountability, no admission that they got it wrong this season. And as I say, we're not going to see that either.
Mm-hmm. And obviously we'll touch the last point I want to make is the summer. You probably discussed this obviously when Neil Lennon was under a bit of pressure. Who do you think's a realistic option to come in the summer?
The one I keep going back to is Eddie Howe. He's the one that excites me. He's the one that I think's the most like Brendan Rodgers in terms of the way he was. And I know Howe's never managed a club the size of Liverpool, but in terms of where Brendan Rodgers was when we took him in, he was kind of on the scrap heap a bit, but he still had a good reputation. I think Eddie Howe has got the same. He's been quoted as saying that he wants his next job to be a proper club he can get excited about and build something. And I think we can offer that, whereas, you know, a Sheffield United or a Crystal Palace or a West Brom can't. I think he wants it to be part of something proper, and I would just love to see someone like that come in. But I think we need to do it now, because we've got such a good opportunity now between now and the end of the season to make that change now. Give him 5 months. Give him what Leicester did with Brendan Rodgers. They got him in February and they gave him the rest of that season. And fair enough, they didn't see the rewards that season, because that season was already gubbed for them like it is for us. But from the following season onwards, they got the rewards because he knew his best players. He knew what he had to do. That's why, for me, we have to make the change now. Because as I said earlier on, if we keep Neil Lennon in charge, what is the point? Like, what is the point in keeping him in charge right now? Because it's all over.
And can you see a change coming? Like, Law's been mentioned, but it's been mentioned that the higher ups are, the fans want the higher ups out. Can you see a change coming? The likes of Peter Law leaving at the end of the season or anything like that? Is that something you think as a realistic possibility?
There's been rumours that he's going to move on, but I believe that when I see it. It'll all depend on what the fans want to do, whether they want to hold their season ticket money. As I said earlier, there needs to be a collective movement for the support and saying, we're not going to give you money until we see change and we see a plan going forward. But as I say, I'm not holding my breath in that one.
Do you see, just when you touched on Scott Brown earlier, say they go on and Raiders win the league and the 9 years of dominance and everything, do you think that is probably the best time for him to say goodbye and just almost thanks for the memories, you've captain of the club for so long, a legend, won all these trophies? Do you think it's the right time for him to say goodbye? I know it wouldn't be a good note, but and then can I start afresh almost with a new manager and a new regime, presuming Callum McGregor will go and be the club captain? Do you think that's probably the best time for him to almost go, because it's an end of an era almost kind of type thing?
As you say, it's not the perfect time, because you wanted Scott Brown to go out on a high. But I think see while Neil Lennon's legacy, in my opinion, will be tarnished, if not ruined, by what's happened, I think fans will remember Scott Brown really, really positively. Yeah. Albeit it's ended negatively for him, or it will end negatively for him, unless there's some sort of campaign to win the Scottish Cup for Lennon and Brown, which, to be honest, I really wouldn't bank against the club putting that out in a statement that they want to win the Scottish Cup for these guys. But anyway, on Brown, I think he'll be remembered really positively, but it's the right time to move on. And I think he'll be remembered, again, this might be controversial, but for me, probably as Celtic's second greatest ever captain, given what he's done at the club.
Definitely, but that'll do us for this episode. I want to thank you very much, Hamish, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, thanks for having us on, guys.
No worries. Shanker's pleasure as always.
Pleasure's all mine.
Brilliant.
Good to get a different perspective, if you know what I mean.
Definitely. We'll be keeping up to date with any breaking news that comes up regarding this situation and any other situations in Scottish football. But thanks very much, everyone. We'll see you soon. Cheers.